African American music is at the center of the African American experience. Music has been the saving grace that has helped African Americans get through some challenging times, and music has been the inspiration that has strengthened African Americans to press for better times.
Welcome to the Empowerment Zone with Ramona Houston, where we zone in on Black and Brown relations and our journey to empowering our communities.
Resistance and resilience is what African American music has historically been all about. If you enjoy history, music, and learning about the African American experience, this episode is for you. Dr. Dwight Andrews and I discuss the history of African American music and its significance in African American life. But we also question and challenge where African American music is going today. Musician, performing artist, pastor, and educator, Dr. Dwight Andrews is an associate professor of music theory at Emory University and senior minister of First Congregational Church in Atlanta. Dr. Dwight Andrews, it's such a pleasure to have you to join us today.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be with you today.
Welcome to the Empowerment Zone. You are one of the very influential people in Atlanta and in our nation, particularly when you look at the world of music and the world of religion and all the work you do is just really incredible. And in fact, I saw you on the recent documentary, The Black Church.
Yes.
This Is Our Story, This Is Our Song, which was, I loved that documentary. And it was great to see you featured there.
It was a great project. And I didn't realize that I was going to end up being one of the, talking heads, but I also was one of the story consultants. And so it was a wonderful 2 years of, doing what we do as researchers to kind of provide all of the back information that ultimately got compressed into, 4 hours after 400 years of, African American religious history. But I thought it was very successful. It was good television.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing as a historian. I was like, how are they going to get through 400 years in 4 hours? But y'all did an incredible job. And I know there was so much valuable information that you couldn't put in there. But what y'all did do in terms of the final project was really impressive.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the gifts of Dr. Henry Louis Gates. He has really become quite a storyteller in film. He can really give you not only the facts, but he can make a compelling story that a lot of different people from different walks of life can be engaged in. And that's a real gift that he has. And so I was really pleased and really honored to be a part of the project.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we get started on this great topic that you chose for today, Black music, resistance and resilience, which I really can't wait to talk about. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself? We always allow a few minutes for our audience to connect with our guests.
Sure. Well, I have on one level, a very complicated story, and then on another level, a very simple story. I grew up in Detroit, Michigan, and went to public school. In Detroit, we had an arts high school called Cass Technical High School. So anyone that was really advanced in music could audition and be a part of this arts high school, kind of like New York Music and Art. And so I went to Cass in high school and had a great experience in Detroit because Detroit is such a rich cultural center, not just in terms of jazz and Motown, which was coming of age when I was a kid, but also it was just a rich cultural town, the museums, the symphony, all of those things. And so sometimes people look at Detroit these days and they can't imagine the rich cultural landscape that it was for me growing up in the 60s, but that's how I grew up. I went to the University of Michigan and took my degrees in music, thinking at the time that I would be a band director in some little junior high school. And but as the Lord would have it, it was right at the height of the 1960s with so much going on in the civil rights movement. And I couldn't help but think that as much as I loved music, I couldn't help but think that maybe I should be doing something else. And so kind of on a lark or on a whim, I decided to apply to divinity school because there were a lot of young ministers that were out on television, me seeing them marching in through the South. So, Dr. King and Andy Young and, Joe Laurie, they were all on the battle lines. And I was so impressed with how smart and poised and purposeful they were. So I said, well, all these guys are ministers. Maybe I needed to go to see about ministry, which was a crazy idea since I had so little background in church and religion. But ultimately, I went to seminary just because I wasn't sure what I would do in terms of a music career. And when I got to seminary, that's when my interest in kind of social witness and spirituality and the music, it all kind of came together for me. And given my seminary years, I just had such a rich experience. Ever since then, I've decided to be, bivocational. So I continue to pastor a church, but I'm involved teaching music and playing music. I teach at Emory University and pastor First Congregational Church. It's been a really winding road for me with so many blessings that I couldn't have planned on. But I really feel like each opportunity God has said, I prepared you for this moment, go for it. And I've been going for it for the last 50 years. So I'm grateful, but I've had, as you know, a wide range of experiences working with August Wilson for almost 20 years and 5 or 6 Broadway plays. And that whole process was an education, and watching young actors and actresses develop. And many of them, they did their first Broadway shows with August. So Angela Bassett and Sam Jackson and all of the people that are now kind of in the pantheon, Vi Davis, all of them got their Broadway starts in an August Wilson play. So I had a wonderful experience of knowing these brilliantly gifted artists before they were famous, and when they were still hungry just to do the work. And so my life has been a blessing like that. And so in one area or another, I've been able to try to draw on all of these different experiences. And so it's been a very rich experience.
Wow. When you look at the experience of being an educator, a performer, and a pastor, and bringing that all into who you are now is really impressive. A lot of people, or we've been taught as a society, that you should choose one thing to do, and that you can't possibly pursue all of the gifts that God gives you. And I don't believe that God gives you a gift if you're not supposed to use it.
Exactly. I agree. And I think that, if we follow in the footsteps of our ancestors always did more than one thing. They didn't just make music, or they didn't just, preach. They had to plant the crop, they had to teach the other children. They had to, we've always had to do whatever needed to be done. And I think that that sense of utility has been very important to me. It would be crazy to think, well, I'm a musician, so I don't care about civil rights, or I'm a preacher and I don't care about music. I mean, who does that? So if God puts all of that in your path, there's a reason for it. And one of the things, Ramona, that I'm coming to, Dr. Houston, I'm coming to these days is that precisely because I wasn't a preacher's kid, I think I related to many of the artists and writers and revolutionaries that were on the scene who saw something in me that we got a chance to explore some of these spiritual dimensions outside of the rubric of a church, and some of my friends were not terribly religious people, but they were very spiritual people. And so we got a chance to have some, knock down, drag out conversations that I think were formative for all of us. And so that's how rich I think my life has been.
Wow. And then Detroit, Motown.
Absolutely, absolutely. Pop Gordy and all of them. And we used to play the little parties, when the Gordys had a big house in Detroit, and they would have these big pool parties. And so they would let the little teenage bands, play alongside their big indoor pool. It was amazing. But that's when, everyone was still a kid, I mean, Marvin and Diana Ross, they were all kind of just beginning to peak. And I was a teenager. I was half a generation younger. So we got a chance to see them up close and see the process that Berry Gordy had put in place to get them from one place to the next place. And so, I look back and sometimes I wonder, God has been so good. I've gotten a chance to see a lot. And sometimes you learn by negative experiences. You say, oh, I see that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So every experience that I've ever had, I think, has been a part of my education.
Thank you so much for sharing those experiences with us and telling us how you became who you are today. Is definitely through those experiences. I agree with you that we don't all have to make certain mistakes. We can learn from other people's mistakes. And so the experiences that you observed some of them taught you what you should not do and what you ought not do.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And I thank especially some of my jazz musician mentors for all that they showed me, because, you have to grow up fast on that scene. Otherwise, you'll be consumed by it, So very early on, you had to kind of say, well, I'm not going to do that, or I will do that, or, I can't go all the way there. And those things were useful. I think that, the great part of my growing up was that I learned that I needed to have some critical thinking skills early on. And that I just didn't take the shiny object that was right in front of me, like the money or the going on the road or the flashy outfits and the matching suits. I had to say, how important is that really? Is that a part of my path? And so I'm grateful that, I made not all the right choices, but most of them, most of them came out okay. We won't go into the
other. So tell us about your concept of Black music in terms of resistance and resilience. I'm an American historian, and I know music has been extremely influential to the Black experience, in terms of helping us to make it through, right? And then boldly pressing through many of the challenges that we've experienced.
Absolutely. Well, I chose the topic just because not only knowing you, but also knowing your gifted husband, I thought it would be a rich way for us to engage. But to my understanding, both as a teacher of Black music and Black musical theory, my opinion is that music in the African American experience is the center of the experience. It is the way in which we express everything: hope, sadness, joy, betrayal, exhilaration. All of it is expressed through music. And that's why the world of Black music is so broad, right? So we have the spirituals, and we also have the blues, but we also have hip hop. We also have jazz. We also have Black composers working in the symphonic traditions. It's because music is central to, I think, the African American experience. And before anybody was making any money on music, we were making music. We had to sing about what we saw. We sang about the world. We sang about God. We asked, where is God in our music? Given some of our experiences. And so I think because music gives voice to a people that were denied a voice, that's what slavery was about, denying a human voice. Music became our way of expressing ourselves. And I'm writing a book about it right now, because I think we have underestimated the power of music as a means of not just being resilient, but it gives the world our view on stuff. And so I think that if we revisit it, we'll see that we have so many different musics precisely because they're central to our experience. We express not only our love of God, but our doubts about God in music, because the sound, and I think that that's what's African in us, that in African cultures, most of them, music is at the core of African traditional expression. So you wouldn't think of having a baby without having some music, the right music to accompany it. You wouldn't think of harvesting the crop without the right music. You wouldn't think of burying your dead or providing the healing song if in these cultures, because music has to accompany all of the experiences of life. And I think that, we've contributed to the world in such a powerful way that needs to be rearticulated again and again, especially now in which most of Black music is now only understood as a commodity. And that is my biggest worry about its independence and its resilience. Because once someone has put a price on it, or once somebody has put a price on you, then once again, it becomes another type of chattel. You just another type of property. And one of my big concerns about present musical scene, both from within and without, is too many of our gifted musicians see themselves only as a commodity and not as a creative voice to speak to the moment.
Man, I want to expand on that thought, but before we get there, I totally agree with you. As you know, I'm a former professor at Morehouse, history professor, and I remember having this distinct conversation with my students that all African American music has purpose in it. That it always had a purpose, no matter what genre of music we were expressing ourselves through. But the last statement you just made about commodifying our music, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Some of the present day music I'm having a challenge with personally, because I think it's misrepresenting the community. And it's misrepresenting the individuals who promote that kind of music. So it's almost like our music has been, it has been denigrated. And so I just, I want to know what is your philosophy behind it? Because it's almost as if, it's not almost as if, it is, our music is being prostituted, if you will, in a way that is not productive in any kind of way.
So you, as a historian, probably know this very important book that I still teach, even though it's 60 years old, a book called Blues People by Leroy Jones. And in that book, Baraka says that, if you want to understand something about Black people, look at Black music, because the music and the people is the same. And so I use that provocative statement by Baraka, who is one of my mentors. We didn't always agree, but he certainly made a tremendous impression on me. But Baraka's question, if the music and the people is the same, then what does the present musical scene say about who we are as a people? That's, and you are hitting right on it. And I don't think that we could have ever predicted the way in which commerce and the commodification would become so central to our present way of life that it would co-opt the power of Black music to be resilient. Black music now is primarily valued by how many units have been sold. How many Grammys did you get? How many weeks are you going to do it in Vegas? It's only seen not necessarily for the integrity of the communal expression, but how much somebody is making. And so it's not that it's misrepresenting the people. What is terrifying to me is that the present music scene does represent the people. It represents who we are. And we have become whores to money and consumerism. And so the power and resilience that we saw for almost 400 years has been not just corrupted, it's been completely co-opted, right? Because look, all of the mechanisms by which we used to share music, we used to have parties, we used to go to the dances. Everybody didn't have to have a record deal to make music. We didn't have to have a mega church to have a praise band in order for somebody else to make the music that you and I made in grandmama's church on Sunday. And nobody had any musical background. We just sang what grandmama sang, and that was it. And I feel like we could never have understood what Baraka fully anticipated, which is what happens when commerce, capitalism, and racism become bedfellows. That to me is the way in which we look at the contemporary music, right? In other words, it's not that people are not creative in hip hop, but what hip hop do we primarily see? We see primarily the hip hop where all the Black guys are gangsters, oversexed, all the women are whores or dress like they are whores, and everybody saying B and H to each other. Who are these people? Well, I think that in some ways, what's been interesting is we now consume those very negative images of ourselves. We don't critique it, we consume it. And we think that's who we are. We think we need to be Lil Wayne because Lil Wayne is what success means. And I think we are really at the fault line because sex and racism sells. And that's why I'm worried about the popular music industry and its impact on all of us. It's very analogous to the power of social media. TikTok and Google know exactly what they're doing. That nobody's misunderstanding the power of media to seduce young children. And it's not that people are choosing not to do the right thing. They're choosing to make the money. And Black music is on that same terrain. We have been punked in a way. So now that artists themselves think that they're great because of how many records they sold. You see what I mean? So our whole notion of cultural value has been, I think, corrupted by our sense of commerce. And Du Bois said this exact same thing. He saw this 80 years ago when he says, what happens when big business starts to dictate what the areas of freedom, of choice, and of voice are, right? And he worried when he was indicted and put on trial, he worried about what happens when government and big business become one thing. And they have become one thing. So I've been excited about having this conversation with you because I think that African American people have a wellspring to draw on that they're not tapping into, and they need to resist and say no to the ways in which we are being devalued day by day.
Yeah, and what an ingenious way to co-opt and control a people then by one of the cultural components of their being that is so important to their development and to their progress,
Yes. See, and it's not just interesting, it's terrifying.
Yep.
Because, when they first started making records, nobody knew what records people would buy. And then people started buying those blues records. They started buying Ma Rainey and Ethel Waters. And Paramount and Columbia discovered, what, Black people will buy those records, and so will white people. And so once they understood the power of it commercially, we've been off to the races. And we've been struggling to kind of take or maintain some kind of creative control over our voice in the commercial world. And we don't, because of now the way in which government business is really all one mega thing. and we have underestimated our power to resist all of it.
And when you go back, when you state that music is the center of the Black experience, that is to critique this music that we're talking about now. That is a part of our experience, but it's not our only experience. But that's the only thing that's being promoted right now, or exactly. and that is a problem, because although all hip hop would not fall into that category, that is what we see, versus some of the music that really talks about the Black experience in terms of the undervalued, overworked, the
exaltant side. Yeah. So you're absolutely right. And so one has to ask, why don't we hear more of that? Why don't we hear the progressive, non-misogynistic hip hop? Why is that? Is it that there are no Black artists doing that? Of course not. It's because the industry prefers the old racial and gendered stereotypes that have kept us as slaves for 400 years. It's because of the comfort level to keep doing what we've been doing for 400 years, to keep Blacks in a box. And that's why we don't see the progressive voices. That's why we only hear certain hip hop artists on all of the various social platforms. No, it's not accidental. And I think that if we underestimate the power of commerce on our future, then I think we're in grave danger.
Mm-hmm. So, looking at the total Black experience and all the music that we produce, you look at this whole aspect of this digital age, the taking music out of the classroom. I was introduced to music in the classroom in first grade. Now music is, being taken out of public education. There all these things that are going around us, these changes in our society, which is preventing us from becoming musicians and trained musicians as well.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you see music going, and what do you see as some of the solutions to some of the challenges that we're experiencing in our culture right now?
That is the $64 question. I think a couple of things, and I'm trying to kind of live out what I'm thinking about. I don't think that we can wait for the government, the society, the School of Education, the boards of education to shift. I think that we're going to have to reframe and re-energize our own robust Black institutions. So be it the Black schools, which must be more vocal and much more critical, to our Black churches, which must be, I'm not saying that they are, but they should be much more self-serving in terms of creating an alternative reality for Black people. Unless we claim those institutions and those institutions start to function on behalf of the people, I don't know where it will come from otherwise. And so at our church, as we're trying to reclaim all the music. We're not just trying to make professional musicians, but, we offer summer camps and after school programs, just because once you had a chance to make a horn sound, once you've had a chance to let your lips vibrate and you go, oh, I can do that. Once you put your fingers at the piano and say, oh, so that's how this works, you empower people to know that they can create something. They don't have to buy it. They can create their own music. And I think that that's where it happens. I think we have to do some radical reinvention of our institutions. And that if our institutions are not working for us, then they have no reason to be. And, in that Black that Black church documentary, I don't think that interview made it, but one of the questions they asked at the end of my interview was, so where is the Black church headed? And I said, I'm not sure, but when the Black church no longer serves Black people, it doesn't have any reason to be. We don't need a Black church if it's not serving the best interests of Black people. And so I think it's the same in our other institutions. I think it's possible, but I think we have to reclaim what's ours and just be about it. It's not very flashy, and it doesn't get all of the kind of media hype that other things do. But I do think that on that fundamental soulful level, we have to make our own music, reclaim our own voice, and know that there is a purpose to claiming and having your own voice.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That is a great way to sum up this conversation, is that African Americans must reclaim our voices and our institutions, and our institutions being Black educational institutions, primary, secondary, as well as historically Black colleges and universities, reclaiming our churches and our organizations and our communities.
Yeah. Black radical. Absolutely.
Well, it's so great having you, Dr. Andrews.
I've enjoyed talking with you, and we have so much more to talk about. I look forward to the next conversation.
Great. I look forward to having you back on the Empowerment Zone.
Thank you.
So looking at music and education in our discussion, I really would like to know from you, Dr. Andrews, what strategy would you give students to ensure that they are successful in college? Before you give us that strategy, please tell us what school or schools did you attend, what was your major or majors, and your degrees, and then tell us what that strategy would be.
Okay, so like I said, I did go to a specialized high school, Cass Tech High School, and there you had to have a major. So I was a declared major in music. I then went on to the University of Michigan and received my bachelor and master's of music at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. And then I went to Yale and received my MDiv so that I could become a clergy person. And while at Yale, I really got fascinated in kind of the intellectual pursuits. And so I went back to school again and got my PhD after much pain and suffering, also from Yale Graduate School. So that's my education. And since graduating, I've taught at Yale, I've taught at Harvard, I've taught at Rice, and now I'm at Emory, where I'm a full professor of music theory.
So considering all that education, I know you have a lot of advice for students who want to excel in college, but can you give us one piece of advice?
I'm giving it not because I took my own advice, but because I wish somebody had told me. But I think that two things. You have to be prepared. And being prepared doesn't mean that the teacher says, oh, you're a nice person. Being prepared means that you understand whatever it is you're trying to understand. And if you don't understand it, you need to keep working to understand it. So being prepared, I think, is critical. And the second thing is that learning is a discipline. And we are very unused to spending a lot of time to do anything because everything is quick, right? But if you want to be a great musician or a great writer or a great anything, a great janitor, you have to give it the time that it needs. If you want to be in a relationship, you got to give the relationship the time it needs. There's no quick fix to success. And so I didn't always take that advice, but ironically, the guy that gave me that advice, I listened to from my young adulthood onward. And when I first met Quincy Jones, he had come to our first Broadway play. And I was I was like, over the moon, it's Quincy Jones, he's there backstage. And so, like every young musician, I said, so Quincy, tell me, what do I need to know? What do I need to do? Blah, blah, blah. And he said one thing, he said, you just got to always be prepared. Learn and study everything always, because you never know where the next opportunity will come from. And so I've been, even now, I'm trying to be prepared. I'm reading everything. I'm trying to just I'm trying to be a sponge, so that when somebody calls and says, hey, I want you to do X, I said, I just was reading about Du Bois. And, you see what I mean? We got to do our own work. And it's not about a hookup. It's about doing the work. And so that would be my thing. Be prepared, and then have the discipline to use that preparation so that you can have skills. Skills don't happen in a moment. And so just be patient and do it.
Love that advice. Learning is a discipline, and you have to take the time to do the work in order to be prepared.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Andrews. This has been a great interview.
I'm glad that we finally got a chance to do it, and I look forward to our other conversations really soon.
A special thank you to the incredible team of the Empowerment Zone. Terry Ungully, theme song, NADWorks, digital support, and of course, our featured guest.
If you enjoyed my podcast, please subscribe. We are on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Be sure to rate us on Apple Podcasts too. Thank you for your continued support.